Let's get started, man. Just for to honor the people that are here today. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our last Circular Lunch Club for 2025. Circularity in the Township Economy and Mobility. This is a very exciting one because we're focusing on township economy, mobility, and and October is Mobility Month. So we are honored to have Gordon Laing from Ben's Bikes. And Gordon is a registered professional civil engineer with an MBA, a BCom fellowship of the Institute of Directors of Southern Africa. Gordon also serves on the board of Bicycling Empowerment Network as well as Paddling Power Association's XCO. So Gordon is just I actually told him before this, it's just a amazing a privilege to have him with us today. And he'll be sharing a little bit about the exciting work that they're doing that's cross-cutting into sectors. But before that, I'll just speak a little bit more about this session, the Circular Lunch Club. And if you're here for the first time, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out of your lunch to be here with us. And for those who have joined us throughout the year, thank you so much for your support and your engagement throughout the year because all of your presence have really made these sessions as valuable as they are. So the Circular Lunch Club was designed from post-COVID webinar fatigue, where there were so many webinars and just too much for everyone. So we just created this small bite-sized session where we could share insights from our stakeholders and partners and members just to share cases of how circularity looks in practice. And we also create this as a platform for people to share knowledge and also break silos and get to know a little bit more about each other. So with that said, I really encourage everyone to use the chat box to introduce themselves, taking from and also ask. And part of the session there will be a part where you can ask Gordon some questions. And but before we get into that, I just want to share a little bit about this whole but Circular South Africa. Circular South Africa is a national platform designed to amplify the potential of a just circular economy transition in South Africa. As we know, South Africa is a resource intensive country with a lot of resource depletion, and we believe that the circular economy provides South Africa with a regenerative alternatives of how we could sustain our economy. Guided by the fundamental principles, design out waste and pollution, keep materials at their highest value, regenerate natural systems, and one that we believe is important is benefit all members of society. Now, the circular economy is a cross-sectoral systems approach, and just like our topic today, you see how two different sectors can come together. And this year, we really focused on thematic sections, and one was mining, human settlements, mobility, and we tried to get Ben's Bikes for mobility, but how fortunate are we to have him today for this exciting topic? Energy, manufacturing, water, and agriculture. If you missed any of these sessions, please go onto our YouTube and you'll find these sessions on there. Please share and subscribe while you're there as well. And just a little before I hand over to Gordon, just a little bit of facts from on the township economy. So the township economy is valued around, in South Africa is valued around 1 trillion to 900 billion, with 60% formal and 40% informal activities. The township economy is also characterized as a high cash system of small entrepreneurs competing in a crowded market with low entry barriers. The township economy also accounts for about 19.5 of total employment in the last quarter of 2024. So we believe that the circular economy can strengthen the township economy by promoting local resource reuse, creating employment through repair and recycling activities, and keeping value within the communities through a resilient and self-sustaining business models. So thank you so much, and I would like to hand over to Gordon to share insights on Ben's Bikes.
Thanks so much, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Just want to check that you can see my screen, if it's coming up.
Visible. Just put it on presenter mode.
Yeah, done that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity of speaking with you and having a conversation with you afterwards. And thanks for the introduction, Mark. I'm going to probably step back from the township economy because of a couple of things that are so prevalent in South Africa. And it's going to sort of take you through an overview very quickly of this, what we call access to opportunity. Many people speak about transport, but we just call it access to opportunity rather, because that's a far more stronger way of looking at it at many levels. And to really do that, I'm going to touch on something called the donut. And I think anybody who's in the circular economy may well know about Kate Raworth and the donut. And what the donut is it's a way of looking at the impact that we as humanity are having on the planet and how we create a social foundation above which we as humanity can thrive. So there's really this band that we can operate in, and I'm not going to go into any critical detail around it, but really we have an ecological ceiling which has 9 planetary boundaries or tipping points relating to the environment that supports us, a social foundation which is the internationally agreed minimum social standards above which we thrive as humanity and below which we don't. And the space in between is the socially just, and that speaks to the just transition that Mark mentioned earlier on, an environmentally safe space for humanity to thrive. The presentation will be available, and there are links to all of the documents that I refer to in the presentation. So the key question in all of this is, how can our cities be homes to thriving people in a thriving place whilst respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? If we don't do that, then we're actually digging a hole for ourselves all the way through. If we look at South Africa's urban transport realities, and again, there's much spoken about this, but really it speaks to the long distances, the low densities, and the low affordability or poor cost recovery of our public transport setup as a result of the way our cities were built and continue to be built. And what that leads to is stranded populations with unmet access needs. There's a whole lot of other stuff that goes into that, but that drives the high congestion levels that we see and the unaffordability of people being able to access opportunity. So we really need a complete shift of how we design and build our cities and how people can access opportunity in the towns. And this leads to the critical problem of spatial exclusion, and there's a lot of work done on this. But it really is being perpetuated by current planning and investment choices. Many people blame apartheid planning for our urban form now, but we're 30 years down the line and we're still doing the same thing. So we really have to look at that very, very carefully. And a lot of our township residents face 2 to 3 hour daily commutes and spend up to 40% of their take-home income on transport. And this really limits access to jobs, education, services, all sorts of things, and just deepens inequality, unfortunately. Then if we think about spatial proximity, and that's really in many ways what we need to talk about, and the township economies are all about proximity to opportunity, spatial proximity. Proximity reduces the need to travel. It saves time and money. It enables walking and cycling to opportunities, whatever those opportunities are, strongly supports local enterprise and circularity, and it builds communities that are thriving and are resilient. And the resilient informal economies, and again, Mark touched on this earlier on, circularity really fits into this naturally. Local reuse and repair, micro enterprises, reduces weight and transport dependency, and as a result of the saving in costs and transport dependency, really improves the local economies. It's powerful. If jobs, schools, and clinics are nearby, people save both time and money, and they also work best when they're not exhausted and are not hungry because they haven't been able to buy decent meals for themselves. So it really speaks to a different way of doing things. Why cycling and circularity matter? It speaks to inclusive access. It looks, and in order to develop this, we've got to bring new lenses into the way our cities and urban areas are planned. And I'll touch on them very briefly. Triple access system, 15-minute cities, and something called EASY, enable, avoid, shift, and improve, which speaks to reducing and recycling as well. So we've got to reframe spatial exclusion as the current critical challenge in South Africa in terms of how we can help unlock the economy and let everybody benefit. And then just very briefly, I'll just get some insights from some of Ben's and PPA's work in the townships. Stepping back a little bit, what is sustainable transport? It really is transport that benefits society through equitable, safe access to opportunities. It's affordable and supports a vibrant economy and inclusive growth, and it limits impact on the environment. A very brief description of it is it's the planning and provision of services and infrastructure for the mobility of people and goods that is safe, accessible, and affordable, is efficient, effective, and resilient whilst minimizing environmental impact. And it advances economic and social development to benefit today's and future generations. And it aligns fully with the key imperatives of poverty alleviation and reduced inequality, i.e. it's transport that is socially and environmentally just. A moment ago, I just mentioned something called easy, avoid, shift, and improve. And really what this is, and if we think about it in the circular economy, we speak about reduce, recycle, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And this is a slightly different framing of exactly the same thing. Often in the transport and mobility sectors, we look to improve. So we do technological improvements, bring in electric motor vehicles and all that sort of thing to reduce our impact on the environment. But that still locks us into the old systems of planning and transport. So what we really need to do is look towards avoiding, which is reducing the need to travel, and then shifting, which is shifting to shared mobility. And a lot of the townships do this already through the taxis and through other ways of traveling together. But we've really got to bring that in so much stronger. And key in all of this is the enable side of it. You know, there are many policies in South Africa that speak to the right things, but just haven't been implemented. So we've got to enable both our planners and our authorities to really start delivering on these things. And from a corporate perspective, the avoid and shift is where corporates can make a huge difference in terms of travel demand management. And again, I'll speak to that a little bit under the next slide, which speaks to triple access planning. Which really speaks to three ways of looking at how we access opportunity. And any good transport plan needs to consider equitable and sustainable access to grow a picture of transport for the future. And really in the digital age, it's digital connectivity, which reduces the need to travel, spatial proximity, also reducing the need to travel. And this is where the township economies are so vital in all of this. And then physical mobility as a last resort, basically. So if the opportunities are not nearby, how do we get to those opportunities? And critical in all of this is really good public transport that serves everybody. And I mean, if we think about COVID-19, we quickly adapted behaviors so that we could realize that resilience provided through the triple access system. And in many ways, this is the new framing that we're using in planning processes going forward. And what this does do is it speaks to a thing called 15-minute neighborhoods. Many people might know about 15-minute cities, and probably the leader in this is Paris at the moment. But it's a neighborhood that encompasses sets of policy actions that provide residents access to most, if not all, of their needs within a short walk or bike ride from their home. And that's the 15 minutes, basically. So people speak about 15-minute cities, but really what they are is 15-minute neighborhoods or precincts. And included in that opportunity is really good public transport. So the critical thing in all of this is public transport being able to get people out of where they live to where they need to be in terms of university, school, work, or anything like that. This is probably a day's course in its own right, but I'm not going to go into that. But really, there are four main principles sitting in these neighborhoods: complete neighborhoods, the places for everybody, the places are connected, and the design is people-centered for streets and mobility. And what this really does, it drives a conversation around sustainable, people-centric mobility, transport, or access to opportunity. And the critical thing in all of this is safe. It's safe, it's accessible and affordable for all. And it really does advance economic and social development, foster social interaction, and encourage inclusiveness. And it's critical for our excluded economies. A lot of people speak about cycling cities and how cycling cities came about. And this is a picture of the protests in the Netherlands in the early 70s around what was known as Kindermoord, which was the death of children on their roads. Places like Copenhagen, Berlin, Amsterdam are all considered cycling cities, and the cyclists claim that they were the ones that drove the change in the cities. But in reality, cycling is a symptom of a much bigger and broader systemic success. And it reflects the integrated land use and transport approaches. It reflects compact and inclusive development. But most of all, it's about people-first planning. So the communities are directly involved in the planning of what is happening, basically. Okay, so cycling. And again, I must apologize for rushing through this so quickly, because this is probably a 1 or 2 day course in all of this, but we just got to get through it as quickly as we can. Cycling, of course, is low comparative cost. In fact, it's the cheapest way of traveling any distance energy efficiently. It's space efficient and rapidly scalable. It's time competitive with other modes, and there's some slides that show that you can do 15 kilometers quicker than motor vehicles in Cape Town in peak periods now. It's definitely environmentally sustainable, but from a people perspective, it's healthy and enjoyable, and it really supports and enables the socio-economic integration, inclusion and equity, and urban public realm objectives. It meets human rights obligations and providing, as we said, supportive, affordable, socially just, and environmentally responsible means of travel. I wear many hats, and 2 of those hats are the Bicycle Empowerment Network and the Pedal Power Association. And this is really a collaborative partnership between 2 NGOs that both work in the cycling space. BEN's overall objective is to promote sustainable social and economic empowerment through use of bicycles. And what they do is they get donated bikes from overseas that are refurbished and then sold through bicycle empowerment centers in communities, do mechanic training. I've touched on the BECs, the Bicycle Empowerment Centres, which are local hubs for sales, repair and training. And we support cycling-based micro-enterprises. PPA's sort of primary objectives are safe cycling advocacy right across the board. It's not just a sports cycling entity, but it really is trying to change the way we see cycling in the country as a whole. And we run community outreach and events. And our main purpose is to promote cycling in the interests of all cyclists. PPA and BEN are in a very, very strong collaboration and coming closer and closer together. And one of these is what is known as the Bike for All. It's a bike that jointly was designed by PPA and BEN and is then distributed into communities on many, many programs. And the collaboration looks at the distribution of the bikes, how we train people to ride safely. And the critical thing in all of this is putting more people on bicycles affordably. There are many other organizations out there that are advocacy champions doing all sorts of things. Green Riders, many of you will have seen the Green Riders bikes, and we've got to think about them quite carefully. The Langa Bike Hub in Cape Town is another good example, and that hub is changing the form of Langa through what they're doing there. And then, Velakaya is one in Cape Town. There's some in Joburg. Bukibani is an organization in Joburg that's doing something very similar. And in KZN, there have been some tremendous initiatives there. And really, that speaks to the overall thing, because I want to give some time to conversations that we can have around all of this and how anybody can be involved in the circular economy and also just strengthen the overall cycling approach, which would be really great. Coming out of this, the interesting thing, this photograph is a photograph of a bike distribution that was done in Franschhoek to the catering school, where the learners were really battling to get to and from the school with the distances they had to travel. They couldn't afford the taxi fares, and some of them were walking between 10 and 15 kilometers each way just to get to the catering school. And a benefactor from Germany, through some work that we'd done, donated 20 bikes to the school, so that the learners don't own the bikes. They get handed on to the next group of learners coming through. But this was a tremendous, it really did help the learners get to do what they needed to do at the catering school. And coming out of the sort of overarching approach to cycling and the cycling economy is how do we really take strategic recommendations forward? And I mean, the critical thing is spatial justice in South Africa. It is really key in the just transition, and anybody in the circular economy, we need to be speaking to the spatial justice so strongly. We have to adopt holistic planning approaches. We can't carry on planning in isolation for transport, for cars, when we really need our communities to be served by access to opportunity. All planning should be based on the enable, avoid, shift and improve, triple access and leading to 15-minute precincts. We need to invest far more in NMT, non-motorized transport. That's active mobility, walking and cycling, and also people that are affected by their physical situation. Some people, the elderly, moms with children, even somebody carrying groceries, what those walking and cycling systems look like, supports micro enterprises. And we need to support demonstration or pilot projects, and I'll show a slide of what one could look like that. And then we've got to leverage strategic partners such as the Pedal Power Association and Ben. Demonstration projects, and this is an example coming out of Cape Town. Some of you may know Noordhoek and Fishhoek, but really what we're talking to there is a valley that is 8 to 9 kilometers long, relatively flat, with a number of settlement communities that are fairly remote from a public transport interchange. And the idea was to create a system that would allow people to get from Massapomaleli or Ocean View to Fishhoek Station relatively easily, and at the same time pass schools, the community hospitals, all of that sort of thing as part of an overarching program. And that program is starting to gain legs at the moment. And really, wherever you are, if you see something like that as an opportunity, get hold of the cycling organizations, and you can get hold of us as well at Pedal Power or Ben, and see how we can support that. And really just taking from that, maybe we can go into the conversation, but I think really in closing, cycling and circularity reduce exclusion. They address time and income burdens. We advance the triple axis, particularly in the township context, and it requires commitment and integrated and inclusive planning from the authorities and planners. And that picture there is a picture of a cycling container that had come in from overseas, donated from overseas to Ben, and the bicycles then being reassembled because they transported disassembled, and then they go out to bicycling empowerment centres for distribution for sale and distribution into the communities. And I think, key in this is how have these high level ideas, how have they resonated with you and your own work in circularity? And shall we open the floor? And I mean, there's some conversations around recycling, last mile and first mile delivery, and all that sort of thing that comes out of it. And it's not only about infrastructure, it's about creating safe and inviting cities and precincts to walk and cycle, which really addresses broader societal issues. And you can pick up that going forward. And really that's a very, very probably the fastest overview I've ever given of this many levels, so that we can create time for a conversation. And thanks everybody.
Thank you so much, Gordon. That was actually it was an amazing presentation. Yeah, I actually had a question, but it was around the infrastructure, and you actually mentioned it at the end there. But there is a question. Please unmute Aisha and let us hear your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm an avid cyclist, so it's so nice to see that, there's more opportunity for just like ridiculous amounts of fun and access, and that it provides so much. Combating this spatial injustice is a huge aspect, and I actually live very close to Komiki, so if you can rope in Red Hill somehow into that program, because they're also in the middle of the mountain, completely isolated, I think that would be really cool. Anyway, so my question is, what has been the kind of relationship with city planning and city planners? Because from my side, it's really just, if the infrastructure was a little bit more supportive of cyclists, you'd feel a bit more safe on the road. And I, wouldn't be wearing like 700 layers of Lumo to make sure I don't get banged off the bike. So what has the kind of push been towards making sure that these that people are safe on the roads? And how's the relationship been with the taxi associations? Because I suppose you need to bring them into the fold, but also there's a lot of animosity and just general challenges in that governance area. So those are my two questions.
Thanks, Aisha. I don't know if there's another question. Let me just we can maybe let me deal with that question. We can take more questions afterwards.
Yeah.
So Pedal Power and Ben have got very good relationships with the authorities, and in fact, funny enough, we made Ben and PPA on the Bike for All program. We're on SABC News with the bike distribution in Stellenbosch over the weekend, because that's part of the programs that we run. I mean, just touching on that, between us, we've distributed over 40,000 bikes in the last couple of years. The majority of them, those donated bikes that you saw in the one picture. And then there's a whole program with the Bike for All that's running at the moment. So the relationships are very good. And we, Pedal Power particularly, the relationships are not just at local government level, but all the way through to national government that we're interacting with. And that's part of the advocacy role that we play. The critical thing in all of this is that we can't develop cycling infrastructure in isolation. And that's what I was touching on. In cycling cities are cities that work for everybody and everything. So it's very difficult to do the cycling infrastructure and so on. And unfortunately, South Africa is what is known as a car-centric society. And that's really what we're trying to change at the moment, is to drive the conversation around car centricity towards people centricity rather than car centricity in transport and mobility planning. Cape Town right now has got a program out to look at the CBD and how they turn the CBD into a low access zone for private motor vehicles. And anybody can comment on that right now. And they also have what is known as a travel demand management policy that is also out for comment at the moment, looking to change the whole approach. South Africa has some very, very good policies in place, but they just haven't been implemented. And that's why we brought in the Enable in the ASI framework to capacitate government and planners to do that. So that's part of what we're doing there. Taxis are an interesting one. Interestingly enough, the taxis are probably the best drivers around cyclists, because although they drive very, very aggressively, they don't want to have a crash or an incident. And in fact, in Khayelitsha, the taxi drivers have actually gone and arrested somebody that has knocked a cyclist over. And there's an interesting story that comes out of that, is one of the passengers was in the taxi and he nearly knocked a cyclist over, and the lady hit him over the head with a handbag and said that was her son. So he then that turned the whole conversation around, and the taxi industry has actually been quite good about that. So that it's got both sides to the story, but the taxi drivers are more able to avoid cyclists than many other drivers in many ways. I hope that answers both your questions, Aisha. I see Noel has got his hand up.
Sorry.
It's okay, Aisha.
Good afternoon. Thanks for this conversation. First time that I'm in these chats. I think it's
Welcome,
a contextual question or comment just from my side. My space is to try and find solutions to waste minimization and efficiently. And so I'm undertaking an organic waste diversion program, which the loads are fairly heavy by nature of the organic waste. And we've started testing a bicycle with a little bicycle trailer on it. Challenges that I face is the terrain and obviously the safe usage of roads, but terrain in particular. In some areas I've tested, like Khayelitsha, it's quite hilly, so the bicycle didn't do too well. Area like Langa, that's quite flat, it's easier to use it there. Something I'm testing currently in Dunoon is moving down Potsdam Road, which is already super busy, but there's a bridge that gets used by so many vehicles, and I cannot think of getting my bicycle with a trailer and a load over there without damaging or hurting someone. So maybe just it wasn't a question, maybe just hoping for some insights or solutions. I have started a conversation with Green Riders, and we will probably undertake that conversation a bit further. Right now, I'm trying to just find a solution for the organic waste in the Dunoon area, and there are some farmers we're giving it to, but at some stage, those farmers, those amounts will exceed what they can handle, and then I would need to move it out of the area. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm pushing for bicycle usage, etc. Because I mean, from a waste management perspective, we're trying to keep logistical costs down as much as possible. So if I can move smaller amounts to an aggregated site and then have vehicles from there, I think, in my opinion, that would be a win-win. But yeah, that's just it.
No, I think, yeah, I mean, that's a brilliant initiative that you've got going. And what you're talking about is what is known as last mile, first mile deliveries in mobility and logistics planning. So you're talking about an aggregation through first mile, collecting something and then taking it there. There are two conversations, and it might well be worthwhile just reaching out to the waste department in the city of Cape Town to see if they can help. A key issue in all of this is the need for proper cycling infrastructure that allows relatively free and unhindered mobility for bicycles. And that's one of the key things that the city is doing. And the Gauteng, it's one of the strategies in Gauteng, I know in KZN that people are trying to do it. But really what it is, and it goes back to the car centricity versus people-centric planning that we have to change. And we've got to keep on pushing for that. And that's, from everybody in the meeting, it's one of those conversations that we've all got to have if we can, and just push that change, because we can't widen roads for cars. We need to be taking space for sustainable mobility, basically, so that we reduce the need for cars to be traveling, simply put. But no, a brilliant initiative, I think. And the fact that you're speaking to green riders, and I do recommend that you pick up a conversation with the waste department Cape Town. And that's me using the waste department as an ally in other conversations. So we're kind of making the circle bigger rather than smaller.
Yeah, Gordon, I do work for the waste department in Cape Town. So, but what's critical here is that we are having conversations outside of waste. So with mobility. And there is interest. So there are conversations happening. It just needs to be cemented.
Yep. Okay, great. No, super. Thanks, Noel.
Thanks,
Noel.
and
well done.
Thank you so much. Yeah. There's also in the chat, there's a message from Neto Zulu. I know that we touched a little bit on taxi association. I just wanted to find out from you, did Gordon answer your question? Please unmute and share with us, because you're coming from a KZN perspective. I would love to hear that.
Okay, thank you. Good day, everyone. No, I think part of my question, excuse me, was answered. I mean, because my issue was the fact that we have a situation, especially here in townships, where we'll find it like when it's gonna be an alternative mode of transport, and then the taxi drivers is not gonna be very happy about that, as we have seen with this e-hailing, your Uber and the rest of those meter taxis. So my question was based on that: if we are to implement such, are we in conversation with those stakeholders to avoid the situation where we have this exceptional and wonderful program that is happening, and then after that you have issues with security on the individual and stuff like that? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Msibo. Now, I was involved with a program in Durban, which was the Cycling Academies program in Durban, where there were 3 cycling academies established. One of them, Nandi was one of them. And the communities engaged with the taxis, and it was because it was the moms that were involved. There was an acceptance of cycling in and around, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it's part of the overall drive towards responsible behavior on the road. So we've just got to keep those conversations going. And if you get a chance, I would go and have a look at the cycling academies in KZN, and pick up a conversation with them if you can, Msiba. That's done under the BRT program in Durban.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for answering that so well, Gordon. Guys, we are over time. If there is anyone else with a question, this is your chance. But other than that, I'd really like to thank you guys for being part of the session. And I would also like to thank Gordon for sharing his insights. And as you can hear, he has a lot of insights as well, and he's been working throughout the country. And thank you guys all for being part of Circular South Africa and these engagements that we have. And if you're here for the first time, please sign up as a member of CSA, and please fill out the survey. We will share the slides via email, and we hope to keep in touch with you and have a great festive time. And again, thank you so much, Gordon, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, Mark. And when you do a web search for Circular South Africa, not CSA, because Cycling South Africa might come up, and that's the sports body, and we're talking about the other kind of cycling.
Which is not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing, yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, and good luck out there, and a wonderful festive season and a safe festive season for everybody, and may everybody have a safe bike ride wherever you're riding.
Thank you so much, guys. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.